Most cities, regions, countries of the world are following a trend, reaching a consensus that one of the most powerful tools to create economic prosperity and jobs today is through entrepreneurship. If you need any evidence that the trend or the consensus exists, do a simple search on Google. Type the phrase, in quotes, the next Silicon Valley. It will throw about 1 million results. If you look for best startup city, you're going to get like 60 million results. The bad news is that most cities, regions, and countries will not be able to become an entrepreneur paradise. And I believe it is because you don't create entrepreneurial ecosystems through public policy. You cannot subsidize entrepreneurship. You cannot create top-down special programs to have more entrepreneurs. But the best news of all is that if you look at the current most successful entrepreneurial ecosystems in the world, Silicon Valley, New York, Austin, Boston, Tel Aviv, Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, London, it required a handful of entrepreneurs, and trust me, a handful of entrepreneurs that took action and decided to become the driving force behind a thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem. Let me share some of the stories of those folks. And I'll start with the origin of Silicon Valley, the mecca of entrepreneurship. There are certain dynamics that have happened there that keep replicating over and over again. William Shockley was born in London to American parents. Shortly after, they took him back to California, where he grew up. He went to school there, till he left to MIT to study his PhD in physics. He worked for the government, several jobs, until he landed a job at Bell Labs. His work on semiconductor theory got him a Nobel Prize in physics. He was a bit of a difficult man. He got in trouble with his colleagues. He decided to leave Bell Labs, went back to California for a teaching position at Caltech, till his mom called. She was ill, and he decided to move close to where his mom lived to take care of her, to a small town called Mountain View, California, that had 6,500 people in 1950. And it's in this place where he said, I'm going to start a company called Shockley Semiconductor. There's a sign today in the valley next to a parking lot that recognizes the spot where the headquarters of Shockley were and commemorates that company, the research done there, as the creation of Silicon Valley. The word silicon comes from Shockley Semiconductors. Because of he being a genius, of course, but difficult man, a bit of a paranoid, his top 8 researchers at Shockley left to start their own company called Fairchild Semiconductors. And Fairchild grew up to become one of the most successful companies in the world in semiconductors. But what happened right after that is one of the most extraordinary events in the last 100 years. All 8 of the founders, plus several of the executives of Fairchild, left the company in different periods of time to start and invest their knowledge, their experience, their credibility, and their financial gains in the next generation of entrepreneurship. One of the 8 left and started a company called Intel. Another one left and started a venture capital firm called Kellner Perkins. You may refer it to as the granddaddy of venture capital firms. The VP of marketing of Fairchild left Fairchild, started to work at Intel, made money from both companies, left Intel, met a couple of guys who had a partnership called Apple and needed money, and he issued them a check of $250,000, turned the partnership into a corporation, became employee number 3 and the CEO of the company. Several years later, Intel brought an executive, which later left Intel, worked at Kellner. At Kellner, he met a couple of guys who needed money, and at the end of the day, he wrote a check for $1 million to start Google. These and other folks are called the Fairchild Mafia. It's an extraordinary achievement of wealth creation. It's not the only entrepreneur mafia in Silicon Valley. You may have heard of the PayPal Mafia. When PayPal was acquired by eBay, several of its founders and executives left, again, at different points in time, not all at the same time, to start a range of companies, among them YouTube, LinkedIn, Sequoia, Yelp, Tesla. These are some of the most successful entrepreneurs of our times. And I believe that they have a completely different definition of success. These folks do not define success by the size of their company. They define success by the size of their influence, the size of their network, their mafia. Now, you might think this is exclusive behavior and dynamics of Silicon Valley. Maybe they put something in the water that makes people do these kind of things. We wanted to test the theory somewhere else. So we went to a place very far away from Silicon Valley, went to Buenos Aires in Argentina. Buenos Aires has a very successful entrepreneurial ecosystem today, and by policy, they don't deserve it. Sorry if there's anyone from Argentina. We asked 200 entrepreneurs who responded to the survey, think back to the origin of your company, who inspired you, who mentored you, who invested in your company. And we mapped out those results, just to measure degrees of outgoing influence from entrepreneurs and their companies to the next generation. This is the network map. In 1996, Argentina had about 15 tech companies, represented by the small circles that you see, blue. If you see a slightly larger circle, that company has more outgoing influence than the other one. So if you mentor or invested in another company other than your own, your influence is 2, or 3, or 4. This is what the Buenos Aires, Argentina looked like 2 years ago. What's impressive is that 80% of the technology-based entrepreneurs in Buenos Aires, 80% of them trace their origin to 4 Argentine entrepreneurs in the last 15 years. Patagon, Mercado Libre, Digital Ventures, OfficeNet. Those 4 entrepreneurs decided to change the definition of success. It's not about our companies, it's about how do we reinvest our knowledge, our expertise, our credibility, our financial gains in the next generation of entrepreneurs. We got so excited by these results that we said, let's look somewhere else. We did this same study in Amman, Jordan, same results. Istanbul, same results. Sao Paulo, Santiago, same results. We're doing it now for Bogota, for Mexico City, and for New York. New York is stealing part of the thunder of Silicon Valley in the last 5 years. It's exactly the same dynamic of entrepreneurs investing in the next generation of entrepreneurs. Fascinating. Now, what about Miami? This is the reason why, in partnership with the Knight Foundation, Endeavor has decided to launch its first office in the US. Here in Miami, we did that just last month. Turns out that Miami, you are the champions of startups. Last year you had 4 times more startups than what you did 10 years ago. In fact, in the last 10 years, you have 200% more micro businesses than what you had 10 years ago. But in the same period of time, Miami has lost 22% of its large firms. Half of the total unemployment of the Miami-Dade County is explained by the loss of those large firms. Half of it. We asked entrepreneurs in Miami, many of them are starting a company, but not many are scaling. We asked them, we just did a report, it should be published in about a month, over 100 folks here in Miami, also with the support of Knight Foundation. Why aren't you scaling? And they came with a response. There's not a Miami mafia of entrepreneurs. We don't have role models, mentors, or investors. So how can you change this? And I believe the response is, you have to create your own entrepreneur mafia, and you cannot wait for somebody to do it for you. And the way I believe that you create your own mafia is, if you're an entrepreneur today, if you're an executive today, start partnering with other entrepreneurs, other executives just like you, in a different field, or in the same industry, different functional area, and invite them as mentors, and you start to become mentors of them. That's part 1. Part 2 is, change your definition of success. Once you become, or your company becomes successful, reinvest your knowledge, your experience, your credibility, and your financial gains in the next generation of entrepreneurs. I'll leave you with a final thought. Imagine what would have happened if Shockley's parents had stayed in London. Someone would have come up with semiconductors and created a company, but where? Gordon Moore wouldn't have worked at Shockley and then at Fairchild and then started Intel. Somebody would have come up with microprocessors and started a company of microprocessors. Where? So I do believe that part of your new definition of success involves create an entrepreneur mafia to reinvest, because you also want to prevent talented people to leave Miami. Thank you very much.